Welcome to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said, a podcast for insightfully unhinged
and surprisingly therapeutic conversations with all members of the horror community,
including indie and mainstream authors,
influencers,
fellow podcasters,
librarians,
professors,
and therapists.
What kinds of things do we talk about?
Horror as an allegory of society, from brandishing someone who loves horror as a disturbed human being,
to real-life human horrors like systemic racism on Cape Cod and mass incarceration,
the impact of horror on a family, from the happy family traditions,
and also the traumatic experiences,
the ever-present shadow of organized religious trauma,
the ways horror is a formative influence on our lives at different stages,
horror as a catalyst for acceptance and community,
as well as an ever-present source of comfort.
In between all of that are lots of asides, digressions, and stuff you didn't know we'd cover, but you are glad that we did.
You'll feel like you just sat yapping with close friends about your favorite topics. Today, we are incredibly excited to have the wonderful Chloe Spencer on to talk about horror, to talk about her books, and to talk about this sort of crossroads of middle grade YA and adult horror in the way that she kind of blends and goes through all of those. So welcome, Chloe. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here today.
We are so excited. You are the first person. I was like, okay, who do we need? We need Chloe on here for sure. So thank you for saying yes more than anything.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you for inviting me. It's always fun to talk a lot on podcasts and things like that, for sure.
So the first thing we always like to do when we're talking to someone is sort of get your history of sort of your experience with the horror genre. So I obviously have been a horror fan my whole life. Rebecca was traumatized by horror films at a very young age and kind of was not interested until recently and started, reading and getting more into them and realizing that horror is so much more than she thought it was. So give us a little rundown. Have you always been a horror fan, horror writer, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, like that is such a good question. And I've been thinking about how I would answer that, because I think it wasn't until maybe my late teens that I started thinking of myself as a horror fan. But I had always been interested in horror since I was a kid. I think one of my earliest exposures to horror was definitely watching things like Courage the Cowardly Dog on Cartoon Network. The whole return the slab or suffer my curse. And then my older brother Mike, he was kind of he's kind of like a third parent almost. He's much older than me, I think at least 8 years older, and so he was responsible for babysitting me quite a bit of the time. And so
why does this feel traumatic to me, as I have an older brother Mike that's 6 years older?
Yeah, like Mike, when he was just responsible for babysitting, like all he would do is like the only thing that he would watch is sci-fi. So I would happen to watch whatever was on sci-fi with him, no matter if it freaked me out or not. So I saw like a lot of really bad horror movies, but they were so good, but they were so bad.
Yeah.
I remember watching the Einstein, I think the Einstein one's the one with the dog, the one with the super, super smart dog. And then I guess there's like monsters involved too. I have to go back and revisit those, but like those were some of the earliest kind of experiences that I had with horror. So while I think I didn't think of myself as like this super, solid fan that knew about all like the mainstream stuff and like the pop culture horror stuff, I definitely was like sort of on the fringes and always interested in horror and all those kind of scary things.
So that's interesting that you say that. So obviously I have to bring in middle school Chloe here. So it seems like, read just a little bit about sort of what the story's about and how horrifying they are. And you can introduce middle school Chloe however you would like to then after this. But it definitely seems like those stories were either almost like literary fiction, but then it also had a lot of more kind of like the sci-fi fantasy feel to them.
Yeah, yeah. I think when I was in middle school and I wrote a lot of stories, I was definitely very inspired by things like Tamora Pierce's writing. And I grew up reading this one series by Michelle Paver, and a lot of people know Michelle Paver as being, I think she wrote some really famous ghost story. And like I've heard like a lot of horror writers cite that as an example, but for me, Michelle Paver's Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series was super influential for me. And that one was kind of like historical fiction horror. It's like set during the Stone Age. So it kind of explores like what happens when a great evil threatens the world. And you have no technology to like protect yourself from it.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a really cool series, and it's actually really gory.
Oh.
One, for the fact that they're like fighting a lot of monsters and villains or people that I think like get possessed by demons, but they also do a lot of hunting. So in her series, like Michelle Paver, she would try to recreate to the best of her ability what life was really like back then for people. I think it was like 6,000 years ago. And so like I always loved reading like kind of the gory scenes in that book just because it felt like such a labor of love. And that's definitely spilled over into my writing from when I was a middle schooler, and then also into my writing from when I was an adult, like thinking of horror, violence, and gore not as shock value, but as labors of love.
What a great explanation. And Adam, I feel like as you immediately Google that you're going to be purchasing it.
I mean, that like, so I think that when we think of historical fiction, we think of like in our heads, it's like Victorian times.
I always
Like
go right to like
Right.
World War II because
World War
everyone
II.
writes about, or it's like, come on.
So like to think of historical fiction of being like essentially before, you know, civilization in general, and like, you know, before anything was written down, I think that that is just such a fascinating area to explore. Those must have been really interesting books.
Yes.
Oh, they're so cool, and I honestly have to sit down and reread them. One, because I just kind of want to get in touch with like a lot of stuff that I read as a child, because I would like to potentially write middle grade stuff in the future, or like more
Yeah.
explicitly middle grade stuff in the
Right.
future. But also too because she revisited the series a few years back and put out an all new like list of books that weren't a part of the original 6 that released.
My.
Yeah, so I have one on Kindle that I just haven't dove into because I'm like, well, I need to reread the whole series first.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say like a specific or like an explicitly middle grade book. Because like Code Skull, I think really straddles that line between
Yeah.
like an upper middle grade and YA book, where like I think like myself, I would have been reading it in 5th and 6th grade, but it does not talk down to kids. Like the things that happen, the stakes are real and they're
Yeah.
really high in that
Yeah.
book. And so I think it's almost like that's that book, like when you're looking to go from middle grade to YA, it's almost like a perfect bridge.
Yes.
At the same time, though, I feel that as I was reading it, if somebody told me the label of it, I would have enjoyed it all the same. So I guess I would say I'm concerned that people are like not even considering like some of these middle grade YA books because they think that they only need to be an adult. And by some people, I mean myself. Right. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I felt like as I was reading it, I was like, I could really see this as a TV series. And I said that to you, Adam. And then you were like, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, not if that would ever be in the works, I think that Netflix would be very benefited by using that story.
The reason I feel like that is I felt like it had so much nostalgia and feel good to it. So I feel like if you grew up in this time of like these 90s and you're, you know, reading some of this, it was just tremendous to like, you know, I don't know why that, I don't know if that's the vibe that you felt like it had, but it was so good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely share and like understand some of the concerns with you know, people looking I guess avoiding YA or middle grade fiction because they think that it's something that would talk down to them, or something that would, or just something that wouldn't appeal to them because it might not have as mature of themes as like adult books would have. Like adult books
Right.
will tend to go into more explicit concepts and things like that. But so one of the challenges I think with writing Code Skull was I had read a lot of middle grade fiction because when I went and promoted my last book, Haunting Melody, that's a YA book that's geared for like 16 and up. But I was constantly going to events, and there would be people saying, I need a book for like my middle schooler. I need a book for like my 14, 15-year-old. I don't know your 14, 15-year-old. I can't speak to like if my book about a 16-year-old that does all this ghost solving mysteries is appropriate for like your 14, 15-year-old. So I was like, surely there's got to be some middle grade fiction out there. And I tried to do some research with middle grade fiction, and I was like, oh, this is all over the place. It's all over the place in terms of maturity, where I think that there are those fears about it's talking down to kids. Like that definitely came up in some of the books that I read. Or it was just kind of this weird sort of situation where it's like, if I was 13, I would hate this particular book that I was reading. If I was 10, I would think it's great.
Right.
And so that's what I think was so interesting, is that it's just, I think that when you're in this stages before like teenage years, that just that adolescent phases of those preteen tween years, everything is just so sensitive and subject to change in terms of what you're interested in and what kind of narrative voice you would want to put up with. And so when I approached writing Code Skull, I was like, well, it would be really great to have something that if I did speak to a parent at a convention or a teacher at a convention or something like that, that if they determined that Haunting Melody or Monster Sona were too much, Code Skull is right there.
And I think that's interesting. Code Skull is obviously the second book in a series. The books are unrelated, but are sort of tied together by a nostalgic sort of 90s feel to it. Uh, did the idea come first, or were you approached to do something for this series?
That's a great question. So the idea came first. I saw that Maddox Media had put out The Call, and I think that this was after I had worked with Joey on the Whiteout anthology. And Joey had approached me to write a story for the Whiteout anthology that Maddox Media had done, and then I had just been following Maddox and saw the post, or the poster, the call for pitches, and I was like, I really kind of want to get into something like that. And I think a YA novella is something new. I haven't done it before. I've written other things that are set in the 90s before. I've written like some other like novels. I wrote an entire game which is based in the 90s. It takes place, I think, I want to say from like 93 to 96, and then jumps forward a little bit into the early 2000s. So I really love writing about the 90s as a decade, because I think that there were so many interesting things going on, and it was just on the precipice of this transition to all these new technologies that we work
Yes.
with today. Yeah, yeah,
Having lived it, and it was the coolest time ever. Like,
yeah.
I think even there's this pocket of people that are born from 1977 through 1983 that they're called Xennials. Like, it's half millennial, half Gen X, because they grew up with an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. But
Digital adolescence,
that's
really.
yeah, adolescence, yeah. And basically it switches right around that 90, like 93,
95,
94,
96,
95.
yeah.
Yes. And so what like a fun time. I just think about, this is a tangent, but it's a worthwhile story of, the dial up and just your phone line being I just remember like my parents were supposed to pick me up from sports, and trying to call home to be like, hey, someone forgot me. And it's like the dial up was
That
on.
sound.
You
Sound.
you can't get through. The line was busy
Yeah.
the whole time. So we ended up getting a second phone line because we had to, to have that. So it's just like, but there was no tracking of everything. And, just, I felt like Cold Skull, like it just sunk you right into this beautiful time where, you could be this almost autonomous, like adolescent, I guess. It's like, we felt like we had so much freedom as a teenager that we just don't, like with our own children and what now, but it's like, I just felt like, Chloe, you captured it so well. And like the fear, and I just feel like the way that it all works together. And I kept trying to think of like, okay, well, what age are these people and what are they doing? And just going back to some of the language you were using. And I felt like you just captured it all so well, just created such an atmosphere.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I remember, I grew up mostly in the 2000s. I was 4, I think, when the 90s ended. And so I didn't really get to experience a lot of that, but definitely, when I was growing up, I got to experience a lot of the days before cell phones really were in use. And
Yes.
honestly, I think that was much to my benefit. I feel like there's too much. I feel like, and I feel like such a, so like curmudgeonly, I guess is the word that I would say, where it's like these phones are ruining but these phones, literally, it's so hard to disconnect now.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because we have a 12-year-old and she doesn't get in trouble too often, but she had dyed her hair red and basically plastered it all over the
Turned our
bathroom.
bathroom into a crime scene.
And yeah, pretty much, because it was red. And so we were like, okay, like you got to clean this up, and you definitely are grounded this time. But she was without her phone, and she was just like, you know what, you should take my phone more often. Like, I think I need time without my phone. And I was like, I'm really impressed that you would say that and feel that way, you know?
Yeah.
And then we did listen to Nat Cassidy talking about just like a little bit of, um, about his new story that he's writing, like a kids on bike feel. And he was saying it's really difficult to write about that right now. Like, it doesn't really even exist. Whereas that time period was, that you're writing about in the 90s, it's like you could have the adventures like this. Whereas now it doesn't really exist because everything's connected.
Right. Everything's connected. There's an expectation, I think, to check in constantly and have access to people constantly. And I think that like this idea or this perception of having access to people constantly is also like put a lot of strains on relationships. I feel like it makes people a little anxious, because it's like you saw the meme that I sent you like 15 minutes ago, but you haven't like responded. It's just like we never used to deal with that. It's interesting. I think it's really just kind of changed our brain chemistry and how we relate to
Yes.
one another, for sure.
I think it's interesting. I wonder if this was purposeful, but Code Skull itself, the villain, the demon of that book, is almost a foreshadowing of that connected nature, right? That
Ooh.
Yes.
he can be anywhere that is, electric. At the time it was sort of we weren't connected in that way, so the kids don't kind of expect him to be able to, or it, whatever, to be everywhere. But it almost kind of is that same thing of like, today it's like I can see you everywhere. I'm tracking where you are on my phone. And like, Code Skull is almost that like villainous, manifestation of what would eventually happen, that, so many things are just ubiquitous at all times. Like, was that purposeful, or did you like think of anything like that while you were writing this?
I wish I could say that I did, but I did
She's like,
not.
yeah, yeah.
Of
That's
course
so
I did.
cool. That's awesome. I was honestly thinking, when I saw the call for the pitch, I was trying to think about like what kind of things were going on in the 90s, and I thought about like Y2K. Y2K was a big thing that was coming up, but I was like, I don't know if I want to do something that's explicitly like Y2K. I feel like a lot of people would go for that. But I thought about things like Scooby Doo and the Cyber Chase was,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that one was really popular. I personally am a bigger fan of Zombie Island, but
Of
I
course.
really did like Scooby Doo
Yeah.
and the Cyber Chase, and how it just felt like this. You watch that film and it just feels like this constant, like boom, 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 boom. They're going from place to place. But I also thought about how I wanted it to be like a gamer girl. And one of the biggest villains, I think back then, one of the creepiest video game villains was Shodan from the System Shock games.
Yes.
And Shodan was so scary, and like the things that they could do in that game were so scary because her dialogue was so very like strange and disturbing. She refers to people, I think, as like meat bags or something like that.
Ugh.
They break the computer like at multiple points, so like you'll like the game will like forcibly like exit you out, or it'll jump around, or it just starts glitching. And so it's very scary. It feels like it's kind of designed that way to make it feel like she's taking over your computer and is just going beyond the confines of the game. And so I think with Code Skull, I was like, it would be really cool to do a demon that actually does exit the game, and doesn't just break the fourth wall like Shodan
Yeah.
does.
Well, it's you named a couple of things that I wanted to touch on here for our listeners. So, if you're new to horror and you're trying to like dip your toe in, if you haven't been a long-term listener, or if you haven't read any books like this, I feel like, first of all, there's a full spectrum of anywhere from like light horror to like extreme, right?
Right.
And the way I felt like this book encaptured was like, if you ever liked Scooby Doo, but wanted like a bit more aggressive and really cool, like that's a good book for you. If you like Stranger Things, you should read this book. And then, what's the one you just said?
Was it System Shock or
No, I was thinking, sorry, thank you, help me. Jumanji, like the premise of that movie, but like that was all like funny and laughy, but this is like scary and good. So I'm just trying to give our listeners like a concept of if you like this, I mean, obviously it's incredibly unique and creative and certainly has its own take on everything. But in the age of an algorithm where it's like, if you like this, you'd probably like this is what I'm trying to associate that with. Now, Chloe, I do want to tell you, one of my odd fears is of very large things, like large objects. So I want you to think of like,
become animated.
yeah. So think of like the NFL.
The robot, like in the commercials.
And I remember when they first like let him out and he's like jumping around. I'm like, oh my God, I can't look at this. I hate him. I hate it. What's his name? Cletus or something?
Oh, I don't, something like that.
Okay. I hate him. And so there's a scene in your book where something incredibly large is causing massive destruction and I'm freaking out. Like I would have lost it, just lost it. Like there would have been no reason, whatever way I could have exited the house, I would have gone. But like, I just love that you painted something like that. I thought it was such a unique and fun scene. And I just sped through this book. Like I could not go fast enough to just consume it and see where it was going. Loved it.
That's awesome. Yes. That scene, honestly, like from the description of the noises alone, if I was in that scenario, I would cry. I would just cry. I don't like loud noises.
I think I would just freeze.
That's a great question. When you're writing things, are you like freaking yourself out? Are you like, I would never want to be going through what my characters are right now?
So let's make them.
Oh, gosh. I guess it kind of depends on the thing that I'm writing. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, this is just something that like feels like a little implausible or out of the. I feel like I rarely scare myself when writing, but like with Code Skull, I was so anxious about writing that because I was like, wait, he can be everywhere.
and he was.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really liked was towards the end, you know, they eventually do get a parent involved, and it was nice that the parent actually believes them. I felt like that was coming from this age range of what we're talking about, of where it was very easily to be like kind of dismissed or parents don't believe, or, you know, we're talking about, I don't remember seeing the, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are broadcasted?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of the level that we're dealing with here. And actually to have a parent that was like, actually, I'm going to believe you. I felt really satisfying as a reader.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, I love that relationship. I'll just say that that's Kane and his dad for any listeners. One of the characters, Kane, he's like the punk rocker occultist kid. And I think that one of the things that was really fun when approaching Kane's character is that there's this stereotype that when you write like this punk rocker character that like they don't have good relationships with their parents and that's why they're so punk rock. And versus like with Kane, what I wanted to do was actually show a kid that had a really good relationship with his parents. And I think Kane's dad, there's a line where they said, like, you know, your mom and I are glad that you're trying all these new things. I wanted Kane to, have parents that supported his interests and like wanted him to be interesting and learn. This is not explored in Code Skull itself, but his dad's an electrical engineer. His mom has a PhD in physics and teaches at a university. She's a professor. So I feel like his parents are very intellectual and they would want their son to be as well.
Yeah. And I love how he's like, wait, are you still going by this name? It just showed the full embracing of the fact that, and that would have been a really radical idea at that time to say, no, go ahead and discover and be yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There is always like, if someone's punk rock, there's trauma. And instead this was like, no, we want you to try these things on. So just very healing maybe to people that go through things that didn't have those experiences. It was very nice to read.
Yeah. I also just feel like there's like a lot of, I mean, I guess from my experiences reading middle grade and YA fiction, I can't think of many books where the kids have a positive relationship with their dad too, or like their relationship with their dad is strained or such a thing. I've definitely written a lot of stories where the relationship with the dad is strained, which is actually kind of funny because my relationship with my dad throughout most of my life has been pretty good. It was my relationship with my mom that was actually more strained.
You read a pretty strained grandma relationship too,
Yeah,
though.
yes, and I have a very strained relationship with like the grandparent the grandparents that I've had, except for one who had passed. But yeah, so it was definitely great to be able to sit down and just write, no, I'm not gonna have like a bad dad character again.
Yeah.
I just wanted to like break away from that a little bit.
No, I love that. And I love how, like, as somebody that grew up on the, sci-fi channel similarly, but like the 50s and 60s sci-fi movies, so many of them are based on either a child or a teenager experiencing something and spending three-quarters of the movie trying to get anyone to believe them about what it is that they saw or experienced.
Yeah.
So this
Right.
really played against that type. And I think it made, it kind of made you say, well, if it's not going there, then what's going to happen
Yeah.
here? And I think
Yes.
it makes that last section even more suspenseful and interesting. One thing I wanted to ask, I don't want to spoil anything specifically, but there is a very major death early on. I'm going to start over because it doesn't
The
sound
dogs
there.
are barking.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I don't want to spoil anything, but very early on in this book, there's a major death of a character. When you were starting to write this, was that something that was always planned as a sort of like immediately setting the stakes of what is going on here? How did you decide, especially in something that is not necessarily for like the youngest readers, but for relatively young readers, to have the stakes that high immediately?
I
Yeah,
love that
that was
question.
that's a really great question. I definitely looking at the so when I set out to write books, not always, but usually I will start off with like a beat sheet where I kind of map out the story and I do a basic outline. And that particular character death was planned from the beginning because I wanted it to feel a little bit like a threat. I think kind of the challenge with writing a villain like Code Skull is that it's like, okay, he can explode lights, he can kind of be very scary, he can be everywhere at once, but unless I felt like without that particular character death, there was no way to hammer home how much of a threat the
Yeah.
Code Skull is. Otherwise, he's just going to seem like creepy. And I'm like, okay, well, how does this separate? Like, how does Code Skull then become more separate from, like just some creepy next door
Right.
neighbor character? There had to be some way that he could use his powers to like kill other people. And
Yeah.
so that character death had always been planned. And I think it's interesting. I didn't think that it would be really important to Mick, the protagonist's character arc. But as I was going through edits with Nico Bell is the editor in chief of Mad X Media, and she
Mhm.
was the one that did the edits for Code Skull with me. But there's this interesting perspective with Mick where she starts off this book by being this kind of very selfish character. There's a fight between her and there's a try not to give too much away, but there's a fight where basically it's implied that Mick is a very selfish person. And
Yes.
so by the end of the book, she gets to this point where she does something very selfless. And so I feel like if there was not this character death, that Mick's own arc would have been very underwhelming. So
Mhm.
alas, there had to be some sense of tragedy, but I think that it was necessary.
No, I think that's great. And I think, it's interesting the way that you're able to sort of balance what's essentially like a great tragedy in a character's life with this found family that she then has and the sort of joy that she gets in finding people that way. It's a really, like, I would think as a writer, that would be very difficult to balance of sort of like, okay, she's just been through a really bad tragedy, but now she's also sort of finding acceptance and growing in a way she never has before, and sort of the joys of that, juxtaposed together. Was that a difficult balance to achieve as you were going through her story?
Yes, I think that was the difficult thing. And actually, at a certain point, Kane's dad was supposed to die in the original like beat sheet. Kane's dad was supposed to not make it. And when I sat down to write it though, I was like, no, that's way too much. That is not going to work. I was like, it's already so heavy with this one character having lost someone so important to her. And I was just like, I can't have, I can't have another like super major character death like that.
Right.
It felt like it completely tonally would change the work and it would make it feel way older than I wanted it to feel. And it would just open up another can of worms. in that regards. I remember turning in the manuscript to, I think I turned it into Joey, and I was like, hey, so there's a major like deviation from the original beat sheet that I pitched to you, but I hope you don't mind. I think that like it just works better. It's going to be too heavy if we keep in all those deaths. And he
Yeah.
agreed with me on that front, which I'm very glad about. Yeah, I think that when it came to approaching writing like the humor and the grief aspects, it was very hard. I thought back to, I think when I was in high school, I went through a pretty major loss. I had a favorite teacher
Mm.
who, like, yeah, he was just the best guy. His name was Senior Summer. He was my first Spanish teacher, and he did so much for me. Like, he helped me test out of other levels of Spanish over the summer so that I could take the college level courses by the time I reached senior year of high school.
Mm.
And he did it because he really believed in me as a person, and just he thought I was just great, and he was just a wonderful guy. Like, no one, it was really sad. He passed of esophageal cancer, I think
Mm.
in December of when I was 16. And he had only been diagnosed like a month prior. So it
Wow.
was, yeah, he was diagnosed very late in the game, and unfortunately just didn't make it through his treatments. And so I think that when I write about a lot of like grief, the tragedy and trauma of losing someone else, I kind of think about losing him and how
Yeah.
much that impacted me when I was young.
Yeah.
Because there were so many things that I'm just like, I was very fortunate to go to a high school where I think we had really positive relationships with all of our teachers, where actually it was common for kids to come back and visit to say hi.
Wow.
So it was very common to like see his old students come by and visit him, or other people from other classes come and visit him. And I remember just thinking, wow, that is literally never going to be me. There's all these things where I would
Mm.
be able to, I remember there was somebody at like his funeral that came and said, I got to call him Andy because he told me, you're no longer my student, you can call me Andy. And he just like kept stammering through that, and I was like, yeah, we'll never get to that point. And so I think in writing this one major character death, I was kind of thinking about all the things that you get to experience with someone that you really like love being around, or resonate with, and then all the things that you'll never experience again, and then the things that you will just never get to experience because there was an endpoint to that. So I think that I think is how I sort of navigate writing a lot of like the trauma and the tragedy. I think Mick has like a lot of feelings about, wow, these were things that I used to find so annoying about this particular
Mm.
person, and now
Mm.
never again will I get to experience them.
Mm.
And then when it came to, I guess, balancing that in with some of the joy, I mean, I think my friends back in high school got me through a lot of it. Christian, who I'm sorry, plays, not plays, but he like is the inspiration for Tommy, one of the characters in the book. Christian definitely helped me get through a lot of tough times in high school. And
Was that who the
sometimes
book is dedicated to?
yes, yes,
Oh,
the book
okay,
is
yeah.
dedicated to him as well. Yeah. He helped me get through so much stuff. I mean, honestly, like I look back on high school favorably, I think, compared to most people, but there was still just a lot of bad things that happened during that time. As
It
is,
has a
I think
deeply traumatic, like, you don't leave high school unscathed
yeah.
in a lot
Yeah.
of different ways. Yeah, I think that definitely is true, and I think that's really fascinating, like, the thoughts, and going into horror in general, and especially like as we talk about this YA novella, I think that people again sort of attribute, it's like, okay, it's a scary electrical demon, it chases people, it's scary and fun, blah blah blah, but like all of this thought that you're bringing into it, it's there on the page and you feel it even when it's not explicit. And I think that that's why I wanted to talk to you, and that's why I think this is such a great example of a book that in so many ways would get maybe passed over by people that are looking for, whatever it is, literary fiction or even sci-fi and that kind of thing. And why I, as I've posted so much about it on my Instagram, because like, I'm like, no, I think everyone is going to get something
Absolutely.
from this book.
And for someone who's, not a reader of the horror genre, and the way that you're layering in the complexities here, it's light without being heavy and it's heavy without being light. It's like a perfect balance. And to know, Chloe, that you were able to use this to explore your own feelings, to reflect and really I guess probably in your heart, dedicate this to this teacher that, I mean, shout out to teachers that do this for students. And I certainly can think of one for myself that was like that and changed the course of my life and shortly died afterwards. So kind of what you're describing right now, I think of Mr. Smith, and you don't forget those things. And so I just love that you're able to use the horror genre to still dig into some of these things of an experience of grief and loss. And that's a universal experience. I just think back to just thinking how a lot of these horror writers use this to bring catharsis and healing and work through deep feelings. And I would not think that that is a typical thought when someone thinks, oh, this is what I'm going to get out of reading a horror book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's still a lot of misconceptions surrounding horror. It kind of reminds me of I went to the Twin Cities Book Festival. I tabled there last year, and I remember that someone had come up to my table and they were like, "Well, I just don't understand why people would like horror." And I'm like, "Well, it's usually just a very high octane way for people to explore these big picture things in a way that's not like so heavy or so I don't know. I feel like a drama sometimes can be like a little wordy or it can be like a
Mm,
little bit art housey and like horror isn't necessarily like that for the most. I brought up the example of Black Christmas, the original 19 I think 76 slasher Black Christmas and how there's like this
Love that
whole
movie. Yes.
yeah, I mean like there's this whole subplot about navigating like dating violence, domestic violence and like bodily autonomy within the context of a slasher. And I'm like I think that that movie puts that issue kind of in a very puts and also like the issue of women's safety as well because there's a lot of ways in which like the serial killer in that film is underestimated throughout which leads to like these women being victimized even more and so
It
I,
also
I
need like I think it brings in the sort of like assumption that I think a lot of the women go missing and it's just very much like, oh, that's what women do. Or
yeah
like she just
yeah
did this or that. And it's sort of like the downplaying of the importance of like a woman as an individual or as an individual, and it sort of brings those things up really well too.
yeah and so when I explained that to that this lady at the convention then she was like oh I get it now and I was like I guess people just don't think about that too deeply. I think that when they think horror they think that it's just for people who like blood and gore and certainly like there's an aspect of it that people really like but in a way I think that you can like the artistry of that. You can like the practical effects that are involved in films and
Sure.
things like that. But I think that horror is really just like a vehicle to explore like those big picture items without being so bogged down with all the other stuff that we might find in other genres.
You know, as you're talking, I'm like, I think that this is something I want to collect from each of our guests of like, and I know we asked the question at the beginning, but it's almost like a snapshot because I've never heard it described like that. You're like, it's a very high octane way of exploring big ideas. And like, I obviously will, I'd love to record that, but I think that's just such a cool way because I want the biggest goal for me with this podcast is to be able to take individuals that would never explore this genre and say, would you give it a try? And like, would you consider that it is not all, splatter and gore and terrible? Like, there's a place here for you, and here's why. And I love that you got to have this experience in person with someone and able to just kind of like give that quick pitch of, well, here's why it is for people. And the fact that she was like, oh, okay, I get it
Yeah.
is really cool. So I love that you've now given me another angle to say it and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's just hard I think for some people to wrap their and
And that was me. Like I'm still
yeah.
working through it to be honest with you because I was like, I'm not a horror reader. And he's like, you read everything that's horrific. Like that's all you do. And I was like, yeah, but that's not horror. He's like, yes, it is. And that's why this was born because we're having hours and hours of discussions about this naturally, just
Hmm.
me. And I'm like, so then how did I get this concept in my head? Where does this come from? Or like, is it marketing? Was it horror films? Like, where do you think it comes from, Chloe, that people don't have the right idea or just
I
have
kind
one idea? Maybe it's not even the right idea, but just one note.
I think it is marketing. I really do think that it is. I think marketing really impacts how we perceive the world. And I mean, immediately when I think about horror and marketing, I think about Jennifer's Body and how that film was like marketed so terribly. It was marketed as kind of like this. If you go back and you watch like the promos, it was kind of, it hyped up like Jennifer Fox's, I'm sorry, what? No, that's Megan Fox.
Yeah.
Megan Fox's like sexualization, and it came across as like this sort of smutty like horror
It was
film that
almost
was,
sold like, I don't know if you remember that movie Species,
yeah. And it
but it
was
was marketed almost very similarly, and there could not be any different of movies.
What does that mean? Because I'm not familiar with
It's
that.
like this like very like, I don't know, almost like succubus character that
Mm.
is seducing men, having sex with them, and then murdering them. Like that was
Okay.
what the whole movie was going to be over and over again. Is what it tried to market itself as.
right. And Jennifer's body actually also has this other like conversation about bodily autonomy at the heart of it, because Jennifer gets changed into demon version of herself through a ritual where she's kidnapped by these men. That's not sexy. That's not like what the movie proposed to be about. Like there's this
Right.
whole narrative, I think, and without being too explicit, and I think that this is what Karen Kusama and Diablo Cody did really, really well. But without being too explicit, it is kind of a narrative about sexual assault and how it like impacts this one character and how she relates to men thereafter, but also how she relates to her own body and like her sense of self after this event, and how it kind of how I guess how there's kind of like this little butterfly effect to when someone experiences an assault, how it impacts all these other people. But
Yeah.
when you look at the marketing for Jennifer's body, it's not talking about any of those things. It's just trying to appeal to this very male gaze. And it's
Mm.
actually a movie that is very much, I think, written for women and like for
Hmm.
the female gaze. So it's kind of tragic, in terms of how a lot of horror is mismarketed, and I think Jennifer's Body is one of the biggest examples of that.
I love your take on this, and coming from someone who's been in marketing for almost 20 years, I love that because we do get the power to shape a lot of the perception in the world, but I also hate when a movie is billed entirely different than what it actually is when it shows up. So it's
Right.
neither here
And
nor there,
Yeah,
but I
it really
love
is
that. It's like,
taken
if we're going to drive sales, let's
Mhm.
make it appeal to the male gaze because
Because
this lead actress is really hot.
yeah, and
right.
Transformers made so much money or
Right.
whatever it was that had happened previously. And it's taken, almost 20 years, and it finally is really kind of getting, the recognition and
Yeah.
The right
films
audience.
the right audience, and it's become this very loved property, when it failed pretty poorly at the box office at the time. I think
Yeah.
of movies like Lisa Frankenstein that, recently came out that kind of is very similar to that, where, these movies are marketed for a different audience, and then they wonder why when that audience shows up on opening weekend and then tells everyone it's not good, it's because the movie wasn't for them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Lisa Frankenstein, yeah, that's another example of a film that was just not marketed very well. I think if you like classic kind of campy horror films, that's what I really loved about Lisa Frankenstein. And people, I guess, just didn't understand that it wasn't supposed to take itself too seriously, and that it was like kind of paying homage to those. Made me sad because I was like, well, there's a lot of artistry in this film. It's campy, it's fun, it's so silly. I love Lisa Frankenstein, and that's unfortunately, yeah, another one that did poorly at the box office.
So, who is, in your words, as we kind of close up here with Code Skull, who give us your best pitch for who you think should read it if two ways. One, if they are horror readers, why should they read it? And if they haven't tried horror, why should they read it? And then we'll move into Mewing.
Sure. Yeah. If you were a horror reader, you should read Code Skull because it's got a very scary demon that's in it. And if you're a big fan of villains that sort of cross it, sorry, let me start over.
Sure.
My bad. I,
You're just so
I was,
excited, I
I'm
This
love
is
so
the
it.
beauty of
excited.
it. Take your time. Take your time.
I'm such on a roll. And then, okay, so if you are a horror reader, I think you should read Code Skull because it calls upon that nostalgia that you find in a lot of the old school demon horror sort of stories, and it sort of builds upon that as well. And it also pays homage to the 90s. And if you're not a horror reader, I think you should read Code Skull because of the nature of these three kind of outcast kids coming together to form their own sort of found family, and fight back against the demon. I think it's a very sort of classic friendship and coming of age story that if you're a fan of things like Stand By Me, that's why you would love it.
Yeah. And I don't think you'll have, I know we're using the word demon, but because like as a non-horror reader and someone who's scared of all that stuff, I would be like, oh, never mind, not reading. It's genuinely that's the label, but the connotation when, when you're reading it, you're not going to have nightmares. It's not going to bother you. There's nothing like, it's just like, an electrical entity or,
Yeah.
it's a monster.
It's not like a religious horror
Correct.
kind of
Right.
feel to it.
Yes.
And we'll talk about this more at the end, but there's more of this beautiful found family coming in the future in 2027. But I'll let you talk about that more at the end. But I wanted to make sure to talk about that before we get into Mewing.
So for Mewing, Chloe, I shared with you that I read it in under 90 minutes.
Yes.
Just obsessed. Adam had talked about the book so many times, and I just, you hear someone say it's so good. It's so good. And, like,
I'm a really good reviewer.
That's like one of my biggest pet peeves is like, just people say it's so good. But like, the fact is it's almost like, how do you take a book and fully explain and come up with a quick pitch to, give the brief synopsis of why you're going to love this book without giving away the spoilers so it's
I think it can be harder in a novella too, because, it's really, and this is especially, I think Mewing especially is a really hard book to get to any kind of detail in without spoiling some of the things that make it so wonderful.
I think I want to give it a try. So basically, we've been talking a lot about the, 90s and whatnot. Like at that time I was every girl subscribed to 17 magazine or you had YM or, whatever. And, historically women, the play on, Victoria's Secret and going into the Hollister stores and, recently that song, I Know Victoria's Secret. I feel like this book really takes on every possible beauty standard magazine trope that you've ever been told, plus modern day with subscribers and what drives up social media and followers and likes and the dopamine hits and just what you're willing to do to be an influencer, and combines all of that into an aspect that I think all women can relate to. And then I also felt like it was very similar to how Hugh Hefner used to have like the Playboy Bunny Mansion, and how there used to be a whole show on, and was it MTV that
one of those,
I think so.
What was it called?
Girl Next Door.
That was Kendra's spinoff, I think.
No, I thought that was
maybe it was. I don't know. I don't remember. But watching all these bunnies live together and how they interact and what they had to do. And I felt like it kind of gave vibes to all that and what we're willing to do to that of, societal patriarchal and expectations that haunt ourselves and beauty standards. And then additionally, like just fame and relevance and just, looking up to and trust and betrayal. Like there's so much that you explore in this novella. So that's my pitch is like, if you're a female that has ever had to, consider, oh, my thighs are too big or, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this, you'll love it. And I think the horror comes in and just exploring how much we are willing to sacrifice with ourselves and give over to society and to the male gaze and, really in a way, like almost pimp ourselves out, or just deny who we are. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that in writing Mewing, I had started to I started working on it, I think kind of towards the end of my graduate school career. And in grad school, I had to make a thesis film, one of which was called Serotonin. And Serotonin.
Yeah, I was reading that in the back. I love that you included that, by the way. I just want to say that now. Like, I love that.
Thank you. Yes. And so like I had to I had to make that thesis film Serotonin, and there were things that I just couldn't do with serotonin that because of time, but also honestly, I would also say because of like university administration meddling, like there were just different things. Like you have to, you when you do like the thesis, you got to like push it like past a committee. And so that means that everybody and their mom has to weigh in and have like an opinion. It was 3 people, but it feels like a lot. It feels like you're kind of, in a way, you're not not that I'm not saying that I'm not creating the art that I would want to create, or that, but it was definitely, there's some constraints, there's some confinement there. And I feel like when working with Alan at Shortwave, Alan understood that I wanted to make it kind of go off the rails. And I think I also like had done a lot of exploration, and I'm not sure, I can't remember how I got started on this specifically with looking at the history of eating disorders and things like that in film and their portrayals, but that I think also went into a lot of mewing for sure.
Absolutely. And you would have just with the serotonin, like you would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling university kids. But no, it is. I mean, body dysmorphia and I can't have, I don't put gluten in my body, or, I have to exercise excessively. And, just there's so much of that. And, you know, oh, okay. Most women do have cellulite. We need to cast you in these lights and that light. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, all the things you go into and explore. I feel like when you say it goes off the rails, I think to me it went on, at least took the journey I wanted it to, because ultimately it, it does get that dangerous. It can go that far. And I think for
Yeah.
most people it does go that far, and it's whether you act out on your body and you start transforming it and you do the things to it, or you develop an eating disorder of not eating or overeating or over exercising, or just, shame or comparison, it's just, there's a lot. And then, you have these followers that they know, and you have this assistance of where the main character is living to really perfect these pictures and the tricks of the trade that allow more people to think, oh, this is just real, right? You don't see all the editing and the things that are done behind the scenes. But I especially love the one part later on in the book where she's asked to do like an experimental, like upcoming, it's a surgery that we currently don't have right now, but believe me, I think if it existed,
Yeah.
women would do it
I
like
think
instantly. I really do. And it love how like the characters just do it to me. Like this is, and you can just like sense how much pain it takes us. And she's just like, yeah, I don't care. Like I want this so bad for myself. I will do anything. And I just think you really straddle the line of we'll give up so much stuff for acceptance and love and beauty.
yeah.
I know that like, from your perspective, like you don't, as a male, cis male, you don't have as much of these standards. You can show up in a dad bod and they're like, it's a good looking man. But like, what's your take on some of this?
Well, no, I think that's really interesting, and I would definitely like to hear. I have a question. Like all of these things really interested me too, but one thing especially about sort of Vixen's motivations as the thing. I don't know how else to describe it without spoiling it. The thing at the heart of the matter, the sort of transformation that occurs in this house and what you have to do for that to happen really interests me, because whereas I feel like almost all of the other characters want fame, want followers, and all of that things, all of those things, Vixen just wants this person to love her
Yeah.
and to know that she is completely like loyal to her always.
But it
And
didn't
so,
start out like that though. Originally she had wanted.
no, she did, but almost like the moment that she met
Sure.
this person,
Yes.
it kind of
Right.
switched.
Right.
And so, like, like, was that something when you were going into this, moment that goes off the rails, however you want to say it, where it goes from being sort of social horror into horror,
Yeah.
and her motivation being that? What brought you to that? Like, why did you settle on that being like her motivation for sort of this whole sort of like last section of the book?
Oh gosh, I think so. I think that like Vixen's pursuit of Margot is the character. Margot, who is this older supermodel. I was kind of thinking about how a lot of women are, I think, not everyone, but a lot of women, I think, are raised in they're not in the sense that they don't have a lot of, they're not really raised to like have like a lot of like self-esteem in some situations. Like I think that there's ways that I think people talk to their children nowadays that I'm like, no one would have ever sat down and done this with me. Like I've heard
Yeah.
of people, like people practicing, people now will do things with their daughters where they'll like stand in front of a mirror and practice like daily affirmations with them, which is
Mm-hmm.
so important. And I'm like, I come from a generation where that was not really the norm. And so I think a lot of women just grow up questioning their sense of self-worth. Vixen is a character who has struggled, I think, to find love. And so when she finds somebody that's willing to help her be successful, I think in her brain she also interprets that as an act of love. She interprets this attention as love, versus Margot is really like just a character that's just trying to get her bag, honestly. I don't think
Yeah.
Margot really returns her feelings for her all that well, but because Vixen's getting this attention, Vixen perceives that as love. So she is willing to pursue this love at the cost of her own, at the cost of insanity, at the cost of her own mental health, because
Uh-huh.
it is really all she has. And as long as she gets that little, she loves the attention, I think, that comes with social media, that dopamine hit. But I think it's when she really succeeds with that one-on-one time with Margot that she just keeps going back and she just cannot
Yeah.
give it up. And I think that there's this instance, there's this scene that takes place in a basement that where Vixen has to almost perform this ritual in order to prove her love and loyalty for Margot after things kind of go south in the house. And to me, like that particular ritual that is performed in the basement, that's supposed to be honestly like a commentary on nepotism, because there's this ritual that Margot has had to perform, that the generations of women in her family have had to perform. So Vixen does a particular ritual to not only like heighten her career performances, but also to build upon the relationship that she has with Margot. So I think that the idea of the social horror and the horror lies in the fact that a lot of people might find themselves in Vixen, in the sense that they have such low self-esteem that they're willing to
Yes.
sacrifice themselves to get that love. And honestly, like another personal note, I was coming when I was like finishing writing Mewing, I was coming off a really bad breakup where
Uh,
had done a lot of like I had done a lot of sacrificing and not talking about my feelings
uh,
in order to kind of be with this other person. And then it tanked my mental health for
uh,
like years afterwards. It was a bad, and honestly, and the thing is that was this other person being manipulative from my perspective? I don't think so. This other person was just going through some stuff. They just weren't being a really great communicator. But I think my biggest problem looking back in that is that I always had the power to walk away from that situation. And I didn't. I just chose to make it get worse because I desperately wanted to be with that person. And so Vixen, I think, is just this character who just relentlessly pursues not only like the fame, not only the money, but she pursues love as a means of sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think like, I wanted to ask that before I kind of tied back into what Rebecca had asked me about like my feelings as a, white cisgendered man, and sort of how and why I connected with this book still, and sort of what was happening. I think that it is so like sad and such a reflection on sort of the culture and the male gaze, and how no matter like what, so like this house is filled with really talented people, right? There's actors, there's
Right.
chefs, there's, obviously models, and all of these different things. But like the thing that has, for them to be recognized for the talent that they have to be beautiful and they have to be
Yes.
perfect in all of these ways. And I think that like, you look at, cooking shows and all these different things, and a man can have character, and be a character actor when he's really not very attractive. Whereas you don't get the same thing for a woman. When you look at Iron Chef and you look at the male chef and the female chef, I think that this book really sort of captures that double standard and the sort of like idea that a woman's worth still in some way is tied into the way that she looks, and how unfair that is, and how it really, really messes with the mental health, and the way that, essentially the way that a man does not have to worry about whether it's his looks, his weight, all of that kind of stuff. It is not going to affect his ability to be successful. Whereas this really talks about how that has to be thought of at all times. And it leads to such shitty mental health. It leads to
Yeah.
so many different issues for these people that really should be able to just succeed and because they have the talent.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it. Yeah. A lot of, I think, success is grounded on being able to, and I kind of worry about this myself as a woman. If there were like times where I didn't want to present, there's a very curated image I will say that I put of myself online, like in terms of Instagram and TikTok, is that you'll rarely find me without makeup. And I think that there's this kind of, I think, concern that I have. Whereas if I post a video without makeup, is somebody going to comment on it? Are people going to be concerned? Something like that. There's always like this level of attention to your physical appearance that I think that you have to take into account.
Absolutely. First of all, your red lip is iconic. So
Thank
keep doing that.
Thank you.
I enjoy wearing makeup. I love to
Yes.
put it on and everything, but there's a difference between loving to wear makeup and feeling like you have to have it on.
Yes.
And oftentimes it feels a lot like a have to. There's a level of presentability. And I remember like just recently walking in Ulta and just thinking like, am I participating in like something that's just, is this all about societal expectations for all this? I mean, not everything, right? Like we don't want to have hair that doesn't feel good. And, I think as women, we enjoy a lot of these products, but it's like, for as much as these beauty claims are made on these boxes, I'm looking around the store and I'm like, I'm not seeing anyone that's like a drop dead gorgeous goddess everywhere. But yet we're all spending hundreds of dollars. So either
Right.
we're all incredibly ugly and we're just out of the store with like as best as we can be made up, or you know what I mean? It's like, or we've just bought into the fact that these products are going to make us look these certain ways. And I mean, it's just something to think about, right? Like I'm not going to stop wearing makeup because I do enjoy it for myself and I do love all the scented products and buying all those things. But it did make me pause and question, like, am I just facilitating or like perpetuating further along for this? I mean, probably no one else was ever in Ulta and had this like deep thought that I had.
Right. I think that I try to, yeah, I definitely think that I have like these kind of moments where I question whether or not I'm doing something because it makes me feel good or because it's like an expectation. I try to take breaks like during the week where I just don't have makeup on, or I'll take off the makeup and things like that, just to give myself like a chance to sort of be comfortable in my own skin. I'll try to like go places without makeup on, or if I my big thing that I'm very self-conscious of is that I think that if you look at my eyes when I don't have like cover up on or like foundation on, I have dark circles, or I just look tired, and I can't stand looking tired. I can go with I
I was
can
just gonna
go.
make this joke to be like, you almost have to be comfortable with the two faces that you have. It's your
Yeah.
non-makeup face that you're so used to covering up, and then it's your makeup face. And I feel like, yeah, there's this commentary that goes in your head, and everybody has their own thing. For me, my outside of my rosacea is I have really long, thick, nice eyelashes, but they are not naturally black. And I feel like my eyes, like I don't look like the same person with or without mascara. And I'm like, I fade into myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure every woman has their thing, but it's definitely like I just feel like the story of Vixen, where obviously you find out a little bit more that she's got some dad issues, even some, kind of maybe a little bit of mom issues, and but definitely the low self-esteem. And I think there's always a part that even women that you would think have the best self-esteem, they don't.
Yeah.
There's some things that, or many things that they don't like about themselves. And I remember thinking multiple times, like, man, I wish I could just like, I don't know, put on any pair of shoes that I wanted to, because like before having babies, I was like a size 9. And, like I feel like women that are like a 6 to 7.5, 8, like it's like, I would be like, oh, they have such an easy time. Well, then I would meet these other women that would be like, oh, I never know what size I'm going to take. Or yeah, actually one foot's bigger than like the other, or I have and it just kind of opened my eyes to be like, there really isn't anyone that has an easy go of this, or like even trying on clothes in the dressing room. Like, oh, well, this doesn't fit well here, or this is different for me. And it's just like, it's a universal experience of, And I'm just like, Adam, do you go through this when you're in the dressing room? Do you go through this when you're trying on shoes? Like, do you have these shame sessions? Like, I feel like, I will criticize myself so much of like, why did I wear my hair, my makeup this way when I'm in the dressing room of like, oh my God, and I doubt men go through this.
Yeah. And how much do you think of that is learned?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. What do you think?
Are you avoiding talking about the man thing?
No, I don't. No, that's what I mean is it's so foreign to me. I don't even know how to answer it because it's like, can I put this shirt on and it stays there? Okay, I'm buying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There just isn't much to it. Like, can I button these pants? Okay, I'm getting them. Like, it really is that simple. And like, I hear you guys talking about all of these things, and it really like, it's very eye opening, and it's very much like, wow, like there's a life and a worry that I never have to deal with. And once again, it's like this privilege that I don't even realize that I have.
Well, another thing that we do in the wintertime, like your face will start to get dry. And I'm like, Adam, why aren't you putting on moisturizer? And you're like, you never said like years ago, like that's for girls. You're like, why would I need moisturizer? I'm like, because you have skin. Like you're a human being and you have skin.
That's definitely not like, again, I don't get ads telling me, that I need that. I get ads telling me about deodorant, and stuff like that, but it's definitely like in terms of any kind of like care. And again, like they make that joke where it's like the women have, soap for the left side of their face, whereas a man has a shampoo, conditioner, bath gel, deodorant, all put together in one thing.
Also, like I love these men that are now embracing getting pedicures.
Yeah.
Because you should take care of your feet. Like
manicures, yeah.
No.
No?
Now, come on, we're just talking pedicures here.
Okay, man, that's too far.
I mean, I just feel like women enjoy like I'm just thinking of the men and the women I know that enjoy going with their spouse to get
Because it's almost like a foot massage.
And so often they feel like they have to. Okay, first of all, I don't think it's a foot massage. Most of us, I think, are fairly ticklish, and it's allowed to pick your foot up, put it back down. I think the actual massage that's in the chair is amazing.
Yeah.
But I know certain men that are like, they have to like talk. I can think of multiple of them that are like, they're like nudging their partner to be like, hey, do you want to go get a pedicure? Because they feel like the societally can't just show up by themselves. They have to go with the female. And that women are supposed to have these cutely manicured white toenails, tan feet, or whatever. And, you can walk around with talons. It's just, it's all those perspectives of it. And so I think for someone that does have low self-esteem, Margot is just the perfect vulture to come in and take advantage of those things. And Vixen just being so trusting and so, deeply loving and resilient to no matter how much pain, she's like, I'm going to push through. I really enjoy Vixen's arc of how she comes about things and really kind of gets her, I don't even want to say like revenge, but gets her strength to do what I think we would all hope someone would do when they realize I've just been severely manipulated.
Yeah.
And it's beyond being like, I'm going to cut my hair and I'm going to, it's like she really exacts exactly what she needs to move forward.
Yes. Thank you.
A lot of violence.
Yeah, a lot of violence. Honestly, yeah. And honestly, like I think that people kind of get frustrated sometimes. Sometimes I do read reviews on occasion, and I think that sometimes people get frustrated with the ending that it takes. But I think Vixen as a character just sticks to Margot so much throughout the story that it wouldn't make sense to have ended the book in any other way, really.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, as we kind of transition through here, that meeting you in person, I can remember my first meeting you, you like quite literally bounced into the elevator and you're red lip and you're so perky and outgoing, and your social media is just fantastic. The amount of work you put into it. And I was just so impressed by the range that you have from writing something so deep. And obviously I think we could have spent the full hour just on or longer on Mewing and one just exclusively on Code Skull. And the fact that you are able to just write both of these, I know Adam wants to go into your thing a little bit of what's coming out in 2027. What's next for you, Chloe? Like, where do you think you're next after that? Like, because these are such different, subgenres within the horror space. Like, what do you think is next for you?
That's a great question. Right now I'm working on this story that is about dating. I had once again a bad breakup earlier this year in like February. Honestly, like I need to keep getting broken up with because I feel like it's a great.
Well, if it's good enough for Taylor Swift, it's good enough for you, Chloe.
I
Just
know,
use it
right?
for fodder.
Like,
I just need to keep getting broken up with.
I
Make you
need
a
to
shirt
keep
with that.
getting broken
Hang
up.
on it.
Honestly, I need to start. It's so funny because I feel like it really does help with the creative process. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, you think about Lizzo, lots of great love songs, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I think that back in February, I basically ended this 5-month relationship with someone who she had said at the time once a week for almost the entire time that we've been dating that she had wanted to break up with me. And so I was like, that is so weird that like you would stay after um that you would continue to stay even though you knew that like this relationship wasn't like serving you. And it got me thinking about a lot of aspects of dating culture and dating apps and things that I don't like.
Mm.
I like I've used dating apps a few times in the past. I think like and I'm just never going to do it again. And I think that part of it is like there's a sense of commodification that even when you take things offline, I think that people think that they've tried so hard to like get to like meeting someone in person and setting up something with person that maybe it's like this sunken cost fallacy idea. I think that there's a lot of things regarding like situationships. I don't mess with situationships, but there's a lot of stuff that I see online that where people talk about situationships and that kind of dating culture, and I was like, wow, this really sucks. And so I wanted to write like a novella that sort of explores all the things that I hate with dating culture.
That's gonna
And
sell like hotcakes. You know that, right?
I
Like,
hope so. It's so like the idea is that there's this woman who meets this guy who seems like her dream guy, but he's got like some toxic masculinity traits and just some toxic he checks a lot of the boxes, but there's like these very like weird subtextual things going on where it's like, oh, there's something off about him. He is actually being possessed by a bunch of bugs, and the bugs are meant to represent toxic masculinity. And so
Wow.
this
my God, I've got
so,
chills.
yeah, and so as this
Combining my
woman
favorite
continues.
things, bugs and toxic masculinity.
It's so fun. It's been so fun. I could like sit here and honestly talk for 10 minutes about how I had to pick like a bug to model like this man's behavior on, and I decided water beetles were really great. I could sit and talk about how water beetles like perfectly I think represent toxic masculinity. In fact, I might do it a little bit because
Please
Let's
do.
hear it.
yes.
Come on, don't hold back on us.
I want to hold back. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to do when writing this guy is I was like, I need to make sure that it's, you know, bugs like hot and humid environments, but what other things like do bugs like? I got to model his behavior on some kind of bug. So I picked water beetles because they're a very common type of bug. And I was like, common, toxic masculinity, pervasiveness, that matches, that lines.
Yeah.
Water beetles are so interesting in terms of how they do their mating because what the males have to do is when they're in the water, they perform actual push ups to attract women. Yes, yes.
The gym bro.
So they're like gym bros. Yes, they're basically gym bros. And the reason why they do the push-ups is because it sends like little waves through the water. So it's like attracting them with like sound and like motion. So they
Wow.
feel it and they come closer to them. And then there's like this other thing where water beetles, so they can live for like months to years. I think like it's around like 3 years tops is from what I've read. I think it depends on like the subspecies of water beetles.
Okay.
But water beetles, their mating cycles last for hours. And the reason why is because the males are the ones that actually raise the children. But the males do the mating cycle for hours because the males specifically want to make sure that those kids are theirs. And I was like,
Oh,
how toxic is it to
oh,
assume that the person
Wow.
you're hooking up with is hooking up with other people? I mean, I know it's like it's bug, like it's bugs
no,
doing an
because
evolutionary thing, but yeah.
no, but like I think that's oh my God, first of all, like, immediately obsessed. But like, isn't that sometimes I feel like when we talk about things like in political culture and things that are happening, I'm like, if you look at birds or bugs or plants, like it's already happening in nature.
Yeah.
We just
Yes.
don't know about it. And then you bring it to light and it's like, that's crazy of like, yeah, I want a DNA test. That's not my kids, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And that's
I
what
know I was
bugs.
having sex with her this whole time, but like it's probably someone else's kid.
Yeah, and that's literally what bugs do. And I guess like I'm sure a lot of different animals do it as well, but I was just so fascinated with water beetles because they fit into this. And the reason why I also wanted it to be like bugs is because I was thinking if the bugs are meant to represent toxic masculinity, then like men are not inherently born being toxic it's being like toxic, you know, having those traits of toxic masculinity. It's something that's taught to them. They are possessed by it. And so it depending on like the culture. And so I really kind of I really am excited about this idea. I think it's going to encapsulate like a lot of things that people might find frustrating about the patriarchy, about toxic dating culture, about toxic masculinity, and kind of critique all of these different things. So,
Well, it's almost like that concept of gene expression that we're born with all these genes and they're like light switches in our body and like
yeah.
environments can turn them on, turn them off. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I think that's going to be a really cool exploration while taking, you know, something that is innate to, you know, a male species of, you know, exploration. Looking at, I love this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So fun.
Keep working with bugs. I would like to just share that when you said water bugs, it kind of geeked out a little bit further because I was telling this story when I was at StokerCon, but when I was in third grade, we had to do our first Venn diagram of compare contrast. And like when our parents came, like it was the thing that we showed for parent teacher conferences. And my mom shared how much she was surprised that all the other girls in the class had written about
Like Barbie dolls and
Barbie the
other
big,
dolls. Yeah.
and mine was water bugs and slugs. And I was
Actually,
just
I'd be
always
really
so
interested to
fascinated
see that.
because they were everywhere in the summertime and or you know what I mean? And it was just like I guess I was just naturally leaning into looking at nature and things at that level. So I did not know that about the gym bro push-ups. Like, thank you for that little tidbit.
Yes, the gym bro. That surprised me as well. I was like, wow, I just wanted to pick a bug. I didn't think that like this would literally fit perfectly into what I was trying to do. That's
That's
wild.
awesome.
So you know when this book's coming out, you're gonna have
I'm sitting here thinking about merch. Like I'm like the sticker.
well, I'm just thinking of a video. Like, someone has to have caught them doing the push-ups on video, and
Yes,
you're gonna have
actually,
to like
yes,
voice over
actually.
them. Hey, girl, watch this.
Uh, and she's gonna have to wear the shirt. I just need to keep getting broken up with. What a freaking
Yes,
line.
can't wait to see what middle school Chloe
Yeah.
thinks about the
Yeah.
water beetles.
Oh
But
my
thank you
gosh.
so much for being on our show. I feel like for all of our listeners, you can just hear what a tremendously awesome person Chloe is. Obviously, you mentioned about, you know, after master's grade, but there's just so many things that you've said here of like the cost loss fallacy, I think is how you said it, or what was the
Like sunken cost fallacy. Yeah.
sunken cost? Yeah, where it's like I put so much time and energy in this, I'm not leaving. But I love how you brought in so much. It's, you know, deep research and really thinking about how you're writing your books and very relatable experiences and horror at a level of we don't think we're living horror like this, but we are. And you've really brought a lot of this to the forefront. So I appreciate you. And I hope that each of our listeners would really, you know, the novella, I think Mewing is maybe 133, 135 pages or so. And I promise you, you will be obsessed and go so fast through both of the books.
Yes. And so we know Ghost Gladiator, which is the sequel to Code Skull, is coming in 2027, also from Maddox Media. Any time frame on our water beetle possessed date
Gosh,
novella?
I hope so, but I pitched it to a particular press,
Okay.
but I don't have a finished manuscript. I'm maybe like, let me check actually. I've got it pulled up in another tab here. Yeah, I might be like 14,000, a little under 14,000 words into it. And so I think for a novella, I want them to be at least 30,000, if not more. So I'm almost to the halfway point in writing that one, but
Nice.
no idea on who I'd publish with yet. Yeah, and I know that
Snatch
there's
it up, publishers.
I know.
Snatch it
Come
up.
on, you heard it.
Please
Whoever
take
she
it.
pitches to better take
Please
it
take
because
it.
someone else is listening right now.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. If someone wants it, please take it. Please take it. Yeah, it's going to be hard because I think there's going to be some I definitely want it to be like a little bit gorier compared to some of my previous
Wonderful.
works. So that's going to be super fun. There's like I have so many ideas for this one that are just so disgusting that I'm very very excited for.
I have a shirt with a praying mantis on it that says "Pray, Love, Eat,"
Yeah,
and it's eating the head. So I'm like, please, I'm all for this. We're
yeah,
ready. Women
Yes.
want this book. I'm gonna speak
yep.
for yeah.
We are ready to beta read for you whenever you need us
Yes.
to, for
Oh
sure.
my gosh, I would love that. I might need the help on this one to make sure, honestly, everything comes across for because there's going to be like a couple different ways that, anyways, yes, I will need the help. So thank you.
But again, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. When these are coming out, hopefully you'll come back on and talk about them as well. But
And where can they find you?
where can we find you on socials? All that kind of stuff.
Yes. So I do have a website, which is just chloespenceronline.com, but I am most active on Instagram and TikTok at Hey It's Chloe Spencer. I also have a Blue Sky account with the same username at Hey It's Chloe Spencer. I'm barely on there, but you want to give me a follow, you want to give me incentive to be on Blue Sky more, go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. So follow, buy the books. You will not be disappointed. I can't wait to hear everyone that has and will read them, all the wonderful things that you can comment and tell us about. But until then, thank you very much. And we can't wait to talk to you again.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you to everyone for listening to our second episode. Chloe Spencer is just doing some amazing work, and I hope that if you have not already picked up some of her books, that this inspires you to do so. Well, we can definitely say that Frances approves of this one. And thank you to everyone that has been so supportive of this podcast as we are launching. I look forward to talking to you again very soon.